What kept me interested in project management once I made the switch was my joy to solve problems. And I think that's really what project management is, solving problems. I think also working well with others, because these projects in development are so huge, there's no way you can do it by yourself. So you have to work with others, you have to manage relationships. And I realized as I went through my initial contract, and even to this day, I'm like, I enjoy this. I enjoy working with people. I enjoy conversations with people. And I enjoy developing the country that I live in, because ultimately it benefits me, whether I benefit the country that I live in or the region. It's all it lined up with my values very quickly. And I realized very quickly, like, oh, this is what I can enjoy doing.
Welcome to Latinx in Power, a podcast hosted by Thaisa Fernandes.
Welcome to Latinx in Power. Today we are talking with Errolisa McPhee. Errolisa is a certified project manager driving development in the Bahamas with a passion for development and a lead role in national projects. In addition to a Nova Southeastern University MBA in finance, she's currently pursuing a doctorate in business administration at the University of the West Indies, Cape Hill. Welcome.
Thank you. Hi, Thaisa. Thank you for inviting me. I'm excited to be here and to share my story.
I'm very excited too. I'm a former project manager and our fields are very different. So I'm very excited with this conversation. I'm sure I'm going to learn a lot. So in this episode, Errolisa will share her journey in project management and public procurement. She'll discuss her initial attraction to the field, managing development projects in the Bahamas, and innovative solutions she applied. She'll also explore her motivation to pursuing a doctorate in business administration and staying updated with the industry trends. So excited.
Sounds like a mouthful.
And I wanted to ask you, how do you feel connected with Latin America? And do you consider yourself a Latina? How is this process for you?
I consider myself a Bahamian, like you mentioned. I'm from the Bahamas, which is, to me, in the Caribbean. But also, I do know that this region is called the Latin American and Caribbean region. So I don't consider myself Latina because I consider myself Caribbean, but I understand the concept of we're all in the same region. I understand that we're all in the developing region because I work in development too. And so I know I work very closely with Latin American colleagues when I work with different organizations. So I feel connected in that way, in that we're all in the same region, we're all developing. And very often organizations that I work for in development group the countries together.
Yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense. And I like this idea of like being part of this huge group, which is Latin America, but at the same time, like think more about the individuality and how we feel connected. We might feel connected with our own countries or some other things. So I like this idea. I had a conversation with other person in this podcast that they will say, oh, I used to consider myself as like Latino, and now I prefer to call out my country, which I think is a very interesting movement. I feel, I love this conversation, so I'm very passionate.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I feel like very often I don't make that connection. So I guess I have to thank you for that, because it is that big region and you think, oh yes, we are, is what they say, Latin America and Caribbean. But I find myself very much relating to my country, the Bahamas, and then to the Caribbean. And so I guess by extension, Latin America as well, because of the region. But I often don't think that far. So this is interesting, that thought process.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting depending on like where you're from or like the country that you currently live. I don't know, those things might change. For example, I'm in California now. I'm so close to Mexico. I have like a lot of Mexican friends. And it's interesting. You know, I was talking with a friend, she's in Miami. She has like a lot of friends from the Caribbean. And it's interesting how this can change too, depending on like where you're like located at the moment. So
that's true. I definitely think there are cultural similarities too. So I get it.
Yeah, absolutely. And can you share with us how your professional journey started? Like, tell us an overview about your process and how was everything?
Yeah. So I'm a project management and public procurement consultant, which are two very big fields in and of itself. But for me, it came together when I worked for the first development organization that works in the region, Latin America and Caribbean specifically. Before 2017 was when I began my consultancy journey. And when I say consultancy, because I think that may mean something different for different people, I tend to take on contracted work for big organizations, whether it's financial management, development, nonprofit that works on development within my country or within the region. And I've been doing that since 2017, and I left permanent full-time job to do that. So that was a very scary and interesting decision for me. My background at that point was in accounting. My undergrad degree was in accounting, and I knew after working in accounting for 5 years, I wanted a change. I wasn't sure exactly what that change would be, but there was a position that was being advertised by the development organization, and I met the qualifications, but the job description was completely out of my realm. I had no idea what it was, but it said that they wanted a financial person. So I was like, let me see what this could be, because I identified with the organization. I knew it worked in the country, and I just knew exactly what that title was. And little did I know it was me moving into project management and public procurement without knowing. And actually, it was very risky for me to do at that time because it was contracted. That was the first contract that I took on from a permanent job to being contractual. So it was a risk moving from permanent to contractual. And I was like, well, you really want to change. And if you want it, you're at the age now where this is the time to make that change if you want to change careers. So after considering and talking to my family, I was like, well, you know what? I will move to this contract. And from 2017, I started in January 2017 to now, I've always had some form of contract. The project management has been the gift that keeps on giving to me. And it was a really good move for me because it helps me. I realized that that's where my skill set is, in innovation, in problem solving, in trying to figure out how we can create the right environment, the right policy, the right item that will help the country, and I love it. So I work on projects that are surrounding developing national market, or that affect the country as a whole, usually. And that's kind of how I got started. I started out in accounting and moved to project management when I decided, okay, I don't only want to do accounting, so let me move. And I applied for this other job. At the same time, too, I had just finished a master's degree because I had known that I didn't only want to do accounting. So I wanted to move in management, and then project management opened up as a field.
I'm loving your thought process and everything you're saying when you are like transitioning from accounting to project management, and this moment where you were like, oh, I'm not so sure about what this means. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, in like seeing the job description, how the terminologies are very different, right? And it's very interesting. I think it's a really good insight for folks who want to transition into project management from other fields. It's interesting how sometimes you know what they are expecting, but they use a terminology that a lot of times is very fancy. And you're like, what is that? I have no idea.
What does this mean?
Yeah, right. Yes. I think it's a really, really, really good insight. And if you want to talk more about that, and I would like to hear more about like, what were your initial thoughts about project management and the public procurement, and how drew you to this specific field? Like, how was your process?
Well, for me, what drew me in was me wanting to be out of accounting, one, but also two, wanting to get into management. And I knew it was some form of management. Also, what kept me interested once I began working on a contractual basis was the challenge. I see project management as a challenge, and it's almost like you see something grow from this infancy stage to this big full-blown thing. It's like your little baby moving, going to the next step, and you see it grow and you see people benefiting from it. So for me, what kept me interested in project management once I made the switch was my joy to solve problems. And I think that's really what project management is, solving problems. I think also working well with others, because these projects in development are so huge, there's no way you can do it by yourself. So you have to work with others. You have to manage relationships. And I realized as I went through my initial contract, and even to this day, I'm like, I enjoy this. I enjoy working with people. I enjoy conversations with people. And I enjoy developing the country that I live in, because ultimately it benefits me, whether I benefit the country that I live in or the region. It's all it lined up with my values very quickly. And I realized very quickly, like, oh, this is what I can enjoy doing. And I ultimately see myself doing project management long term because it matches what I want to do on a professional and personal level so closely. The problem solving, the working with people, and the developing of country is really important to me.
Incredible. I love it. And I wanted to ask you, how do you approach managing development projects in the unique context of the Bahamas? And if there's any specific challenge you have encountered and any innovative solution you have implemented, I'd love to hear any story you want to share.
Yeah. So what I would say with managing projects in the Bahamas or even in the Caribbean region on the whole is that my approach is to have a lot of patience. These development projects take time. And when I say time, I mean not months, but years, because we're really small countries. And very often you would think, or organizations think, you can just take something from the developed world and just pass it over to the smaller countries because they're developing. It's been done before. But we have unique cultures. We have unique environments that are important to be considered when implementing projects. And so, for example, for the Bahamas is a string of islands. It's not just one island. It's a number of small keys and islands. It's about 700 in total, but inhabited, I think it's about 40 that are inhabited islands where Bahamian citizens live. And when we implement projects, we have to think, okay, how can these projects work throughout the island? And it doesn't just affect one island city. And these islands aren't connected. They're separated by ocean. So how can we make sure that citizens that don't live in the city island also benefit? They may live in a further island that's way south, that's far away from the city, maybe an hour or 2 hours, or they may live 20 minutes, but they still have to get on a plane. And so sometimes when implementing development projects, we have to think of that context. How can I affect everybody, even though there's separation? Another thing I think that's really important for Bahamian context is buy-in, because not only when I say buy-in, I mean making sure stakeholders are involved. Because of our culture, I think we have a very relaxed culture. We want to feel like we know each other, even as we work together. We're a small island, so we want to feel like a family. There are not many degrees of separation between people. So for them to work with you, they have to feel like they know you. They have to feel like part. They have to feel ownership, and there has to be buy-in. And so I think that is incredibly important when implementing projects. We have to get stakeholders involved. We have to give ownership. We have to delegate so that everyone understands, like, this is what we want to do, and this is why, and this is how it benefits you, and this is how you can help us. This is how you can help the country. This is how we can move forward.
That's a really good advice to understand the culture, because sometimes you're used to do business in certain ways. And when we work in a global project or in a specific region, the ways you do your work need to change and we need to adapt. And I think it's beautiful at the same time how we can learn with each other. I think now I feel that a little bit since I have been living in the US for 9 years, almost 10. So I can kind of implement some things that to me it's important, as you mentioned, work very closely and get to know the people that I work with.
Yes.
And also I don't know, I feel the way I work here, it's very, very different. It's very focused on scaling and process. And I'm from, it's more based on the relationship. So I can marry those two. That to me is the best case scenario, right? So I love that you mentioned that, the culture part.
right? You really have to balance the two because, working for global organizations, like you mentioned, if you work in the United States, it's more about process. I agree, because I went to school in the United States as well. So I understand that there's that, like, you're a student, you have a student ID number, and that's how we approach you. You're an employee, you have an employee ID number, and that's how we address you. That's how we know who you are. And in the Bahamas, it's still very different. They want to know who you are, who your people are. They want to know before the meeting starts. Oh, your last name is McPhee. Oh, what island are you from? And they want to get to know you before they start to work with you, because that's how work gets done. And so it's interesting how culture slips into the workplace. And I think it can all come together as long as you're respectful and aware that you have to navigate culture as well.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. Another topic that I want to talk more about with you. So you are pursuing a doctorate in business administration and management. It's a significant commitment and is an amazing commitment. I'm very, very happy for you. And I wanted to ask you, what motivated you to continue your education at this level, and how do you see it enhancing your professional journey?
Now that I'm 2 years into my doctorate and I just finished comprehensive examinations with UE, what motivated me? I think for me, initially, it was always a childhood dream of mine, number one, to have the highest level of education in whatever profession I chose to do. It was a childhood dream for me. And so my inner child is like, good job. You're making us proud.
You're making all of us proud.
Yes. And also, I think with my transition to being a consultant, because in addition to working as an individual consultant, I also own a consulting company with another partner. I think it solidifies myself in a space in public procurement, in project management as a subject matter expert. Like, this person has researched, this person has went to school for this. And for me, when I decided that I wanted to continue to be a consultant for the rest of my life, I thought having a doctorate degree and really doing some research in my chosen areas would be really important to make sure that I am giving the organizations I work for, individuals I work with, the best information I could give them about public procurement and about project management in the Caribbean region. The reason why I chose to do it in the Caribbean, of course, is because this is the environment that I care about. I want to continue to build the Bahamas. I want to continue to build the Caribbean, and then in turn, the Latin American and Caribbean region. This is the area that I work in now, and I'm really passionate about continuing in development and helping financial management and public procurement grow within our region.
Incredible. And which advice would you give for folks who are listening to us who really want to get into project management? I think now we have like an overload of resources. So I really like those tailored advice.
I would say if you want to move into project management and you already have a career of focus, I would say to look into project management certifications, because every industry, every area needs project managers. So moving into project management doesn't take you out of the field that you're already in. If you're in sales, there are projects in sales. If you're in construction, there are construction projects. And so I would say, if you're interested in building your resume or learning more, look into certifications that appeal to you on your line of work. I would also say, if you're employed already, talk to your boss about what projects that you can get involved in, even at work now, small or large. There's always opportunities once you ask around, and even if they aren't advertised. I am very good at, I think, and this is how my business started, very good at having the conversations and saying, hey, do you need this? I noticed that this isn't happening, and I noticed that people are complaining about it. I am able to do this particular thing if you are interested, and having those conversations, and those conversations lead into contracts. I think that's really important. And I am a self-proclaimed introvert. I think it's out of my realm to speak up, but because I'm so passionate about development and doing more within the fields that I'm in, it's easier for me to say, I noticed this thing. And I guess that's why I'm in management too, because I'm very good at, I noticed this thing. What can we create to fix it? Or what can we create to fill this gap? And I think that it's really important to have those conversations, even if it takes you out of your comfort zone a little bit.
Yeah, really good insights. I consider myself an introverted as well. And I think also having these conversations in a one-on-one setting, it's something that can help, because sometimes being in a meeting to come up with like an idea of volunteering to do something can be very scary for some folks. But perhaps in a one-on-one with your manager, colleague, you can have this more intimate conversation where you can talk about your aspirations and things you want to do. So this is a good insight.
I think I shine in those conversations where I will, like you said, be quiet in a meeting, but take my notes and then have smaller conversations. I definitely am better at having one-on-one conversations, so I can give you more detail and you can give me more detail and we can hash it out that way.
I love that. And I wanted to ask you, is there any resource that helped you in your journey that you want to talk more about? It can be anything. It can be books, music, quotes.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about, there are a lot of resources. I take in a lot of information on a daily basis, I think, whether it's through reading, through podcasts, or research, because I research a lot now. But I think one thing, the obvious thing, and how we met, is using social media as a resource. I think that's really important. I really try to put who I am, especially as a professional, on LinkedIn and really share what appeals to me so that people around me or people who see my page or come across me on LinkedIn understands what I'm interested in and what I'm about. So I think using social media as a resource is really important. And I think it's amazing that you reached out to me on there. I really appreciate that. I also think a book that inspires me now, I think there's a book that I discovered about, I think it was a year ago, or maybe a little more than a year ago now. One of my friends in my group of friends told me that you need to read this book, and it's called Unapologetically Ambitious by Shelley Archambault. And it's a book by a female CEO who was a CEO of a Fortune 500 company. And she's no longer the CEO of the Fortune 500 company, but she works on boards and she now mentors. And I think this book is it inspired me. So that's a resource that I think really helped me. I think I learned a lot by listening to people's stories. And so I listened to her stories, and she also gives tips on how to make it in your career by planning and being very aware of your resources and using them efficiently. And so that's a book that I have listened to more than once because I'm an Audible girl. So I listened to more than once, and I also have a paperback copy that encourages me. I also read other books that talk about other stories, because I think for me personally, as I go on my journey, learning bits and pieces of how other people to where they did or how their journey progressed helps me to understand, oh, maybe I could do this one thing from there. Maybe it'll work for my journey. Because as I'm very clear on where I want to go with consulting and project management and public procurement, you have to find innovative ways to make your path work for you. So I think sometimes listening to the story of others helps me to know what I want to do next or get clarity on what I want to do next. Another book that inspired me is The Year of Yes by Shonda Rhimes. I love that book so
me
much.
Me too. I love this book. I love Shonda.
Yes, that book. I need to listen to that again as well. But I was very inspired by that book and the nuggets she gave. So I would say those two are books that really inspire me. I am very inspired by females that go out and get it and defy the odds. And that pushes me. That makes me feel like Superwoman, like if they can do it, I can do it too. Yeah.
Representation is so important. I love the title of the book you mentioned, the Unapologetically Ambitious.
Yes.
I'm going to read this book. I love the title already. I feel like, especially for folks who identify as like women listening to us, because it's very interesting, right? When a man is ambitious, it sounds very positive and amazing, right? When a woman it's just like, oh my gosh, she's bossy, selfish, and it's just like, no, we need to re-signify that. We can be ambitious too. And this is a good thing. So I love that. And I love that you mentioned Shonda. I was a big fan of her for a long, long time. And I read this book and I was like, oh my God, she's incredible.
Wasn't it amazing? Right? Amazing. I read the book and I was like, I need a year of yes. I need to do this too. And I think it's amazing the opportunities that come to you when you open up your mind, like she mentioned,
Yeah. And I love that you mentioned your LinkedIn as well, because when I found you on LinkedIn, I felt exactly what you said. I was like, oh, she's badass. I want to talk with her because it was just like so polished, so amazing, and I think nowadays it's just like, we need to do those things. We need to have a LinkedIn, that some people, and I like to write. So I always like LinkedIn a lot. So I post a lot and some people talk to me. It's hard for me. I feel like I'm putting myself out there. I just don't feel comfortable, but you can consume a lot of content there.
Information. And, you reach out to people who are doing what you want, even if they might not be in your immediate area. LinkedIn gives the avenue for you to see them do it from a distance. And and they're closer because they're like one post away, or if you want to send a message because you connect so much with their work and your work connects so much with theirs. And I think for me, making sure my LinkedIn is up to date or saying what I do professionally is my little way of speaking up, is my way of pushing myself out of my comfort zone and saying what you are doing in this space matters. So speak up. And I think that's fair for me. I think even as I talk with my group of friends, I think that's a fair in my group of friends too for women to speak up and not be afraid and not be so silent about what we're doing, because there are a lot of women doing very incredible things that deserve to be mentioned.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So that's a really good tip. I want to thank you for your time, that this conversation, I can talk with you for hours and hours. And I will leave the last minutes for you to share anything you want to share and also where people can find you.
Well, I could be found where you found me on LinkedIn. So if you look up my name, Errolisa McPhee, I will be right there. That's a peculiar name, so I'll spell it. It's spelled ERROLISAMCPHEE. And I could also be reached via email at my first name @gmail.com, errolisa@gmail.com. I'm really happy that you invited me on this podcast because it's really taken me out of my comfort zone. And I think when I decided, I'm going to come out of my comfort zone and post more or make sure my LinkedIn is updated, I noticed that more and more things that stretch me out of my comfort zone are happening. So thank you so much for inviting me to do your podcast. I was very shocked. I was like, she wants to interview me, but I think I'm happy to share my story and I hope it inspires somebody to push further as well.
You will. Thank you so much. That's it for today, everyone. Thank you so much for your time. I would love to hear your thoughts about the podcast and the episodes. Please message us with any insight, any feedback you might have, and also guest suggestions. Message us in your favorite social media platform. We are in all social platforms. And if you want to write us in a review, we will love that. Feel free to write us in a review on Apple Podcasts, Audible, Amazon, or any other streaming that you like. Thank you.